Hi everyone, I'm Tom and we are Team Bacon. The credits will be at the end for their names. Our game is based in a world similar to Earth but futuristic but not Earth. Basic storyline is there was a world with water, alien invaders came and stole it all for their own source, and what was left became divided between the rich and the poor, and obviously the rich are being a dictatorship over it. We've done some research into a bit of water conservation methods for like a desert style place, so like cactuses, cutting them up, getting water from them, looking for where wildlife goes, um, looking for dry riverbeds, pit style solar still, recycling the water itself, and underground digging for water. All techniques that are done now for desert style water places where you can harvest water from various different ways. Some of these will be integrated into the game as quests and side quests, others as blueprints for to make the technology to do them. Aims of our game. I know it says that on the slide, but basically, so by the end of it, we need a person to remember one way to conserve water, to understand how that works, to solve this problem in the brief, and to collect that information all together. And then the outline of our game context. Basically, due to the style of the brief, you can't have too weird a context, so we've made it more player revolving. That it's more around the karma of the player. So, like in game, you will end up giving the people water, and they will have it at the end. But how you go about it can be different. In the game, you can do bad karma events, which ultimately make it easier for you to get water. But in the end, means it's less of an outcome. Whereas if you do the good way, like in Bioshock, help the little girls, you get less, but you get better bonuses. And I will pass on to Josh now.
Thanks, Tom. To outline the player experience, it would be the player gets a choice of progression. Karma, meaning good or bad choices are made, and the player can also complete the game, which will give a sense of fulfillment. But then, once completed, the player may go back and choose another way through the game. So, for the first playthrough, the player may want to do everything in a good fashion, helping people and giving supplies out to people to help them, and which would get them good karma and get a good ending in the end, or be evil and take things from players, from NPCs, and get bad karma, which would end in a bad ending, which adds replayability to the game. The player's motivation for the game is basic human desire for survival, and then the player would feel satisfaction for achieving the survival and completing tasks and subtasks. The gameplay activities, each area has different sets of objects which will be covered in later slides. The game style is third person, and mini games will aid the player, giving extra materials, salvage, items, water, everything useful during the game and later on in the game. Things like parts to make a well, or water which is used to level up and improve abilities. The quest will allow the player to progress through the game, and there's a linear set of quests which tie into the player's progression, moving from area to area. The subquests do not need to be done, but will aid the game progression in making the game easier for the player, giving like making the well would give the player more water, but is not required to move on to the next area. The game mechanics rely on a karma-based dynamic, so the good and evil, which I've already mentioned. The water is used as currency for leveling up abilities, purchasing items from shops. The water itself is carried by enemies, so if the player kills an enemy, they will gain bits of water. And as for travelling, the player travels by foot mostly, but there is the option there to travel by animals, so the player may be able to get a horse or a land turtle, anything they want, well, anything that's in the game they can get, they can ride, and riding by an animal will be a faster form of travel, but as walking, the player will be able to see things up close and in more depth. The first level is the desert level. There will be areas in that level for like canyons and caves. During the day, the player is able to explore the desert, and at night, the desert is so cold that the player must seek shelter, whether it be in the ruins of a house or the cave, and once they've found shelter, they have to set up a campfire, which will keep them warm. If the player is outside in the desert too long, then they will begin to get cold and eventually start to lose health. But there is a heat bar which slowly depletes while out in the desert in the cold, and once depleted begins to deplete the health. There's also enemies that the player must either attack or avoid, and they're the water lords. Avoiding them has no effect, but killing them will give them water, but attacking them and them getting in the way would result in more enemies coming. And I'll let Aaron talk in more depth about the rest of the slides.
In the desert area, the player is to go around the various settlements in the area, aiming towards the main city. They will come across subquests which can include Find the Survivor, where the player will lead a lost person back to civilization and will be rewarded with a blueprint piece and some information. The player can initiate raids on settlements which reward negative karma. The player can also play the minigame for this area, which consists of hunting for materials for their shelter and to gather water from vegetation from their surroundings. When they have finished in the desert area, they will be travelling from the slums and come across the border of a town. Here the player will be given 3 choices on how to enter this town. These options will consist of straight into the town, find another way around the back of the town, or through the sewers. Each of these choices will have some effect on the player, which could include the loss of some of their water supplies. Once the player has entered the town, they will have the option to go through various buildings consisting of shops and houses, and depending on their choice, they can either steal or do quests for the residents in order to obtain supplies. The karma system game mechanic is used in various situations.